last week I had a lot of fun playing for y'all and giving y'all a little bit of a peek behind what it's like to create and play in the studio and make music. And last week I played a play along by a great drummer named Jake Reed, and I showed a few different ways that I could have approached that play along. So that kind of got me excited to show y'all a little bit of a peek behind maybe some tunes that y'all are more familiar with. That tune that I just played is a Galactic song called Dollar Diva. Scott Guyon, shout out to Scott Guyon, one of my longtime friends. He did the cover art for that, and that is hanging. The original of that is hanging at the house. And Scott went on to do the 50th Jazz Fest poster. And then this year's poster of Dr. John, the Jazz Fest that never happened. But I'm just kind of telling y'all some stories. Maybe I'm giving y'all more information than you want to know. But Dollar Diva, that tune is a Galactic staple. We play it all the time. But just now, I intentionally tried to play it differently and play some different beats on it and show you that when creating in the studio, sometimes you'll come up with something, and if you're working with other artists, like I am working with Galactic, and I'll play something, and sometimes they might love it. Sometimes, they might say, try something else. So what you hear on the record is usually what we like to call art by democracy. And it's usually something that we've come up with that we're all digging on. What I just played for y'all was some other beats that I've either come up with more recently or grew up with. I threw in some Johnny Vodakovich snare drum stuff that I love. I threw in some more recent Mardi Gras Indian variation stuff that I've come up with. All just to kind of show you that when you're in the studio and you're recording, things could go different ways. And what you hear on the record could have turned out differently. But it makes it on the record, then we hear it over and over and over, and it becomes what we know. And if we hear it played differently, sometimes we really dig it. Sometimes we're like, that's not the way the song goes. But I wanted to show y'all, like, on the record, the beat on the verse goes like this. And keep in mind, what I'm hearing is shake digga digga bake digga digga boom dig dump bump bump boom deck dun gun bun gong 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 gong. It's basically a 3/2 clave. So there's so many different things. As y'all who have tuned in and seen me talk and demonstrate stuff, you know that there's so many different things that we could put with that 3/2 clave. So on the record, what's going on is this. Okay, so that's what's going on the record. And I can demonstrate that, and I will in a second. But just now, for the first verse, I felt like doing this. And then for the second verse, to change it up, I played the same thing basically, but put the right hand on the hi-hat.
Last week you stated that you grew up listening to punk rock, and I'm curious what bands in particular you used to listen to, how those bands influenced you, and in what you're doing right now.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, some of the bands that I was listening to were bands like The Descendants, Minor Threat, and Black Flag, and then started getting into the Minutemen, and listening to the Minutemen led me into discovering the Meters and listening to the Meters. And once I listened to the Meters, and shout out to Brad for playing the Meters at a party at his house, like when I was like 16, 17 years old. And then once I heard the early instrumental Meters records, of course I had heard some of the Mardi Gras tunes and stuff like that growing up. But once I started really getting into like the first 3 instrumental Meters records, the Meters, Look a Pie Pie, and Struttin', then I was like, this is what I want to do with my life. So I was listening to some of those bands growing up, and I loved passionate, aggressive punk rock. And then once I started getting into passionate, aggressive funk, then I was like all in on that, and started transitioning over to funk, and yeah, and here I am now. So, yeah. And then I mean, bands that I actually saw, like in person, were bands like Exploited, and all got to see Bill Stevenson play drums, drummer for the Descendants. I mean, that was amazing, So, of course, tons of local punk rock, hardcore bands. I mean, that's how I started meeting and hanging with Pepper Keenan, is on that scene. And so, in local hardcore bands, I mean, shout out to Exhorter and Chris Nail. I mean, Chris Nail studied with Marty Hurley. And back in those days, I mean, and still to this day, man, I mean, getting to see Exhorter live, that was unbelievable. It was amazing. And I was right there with Scott Guyon, checking a lot of that stuff out. So, Kyle Melanson, shout out to Kyle Melanson, Peter Barnes, my buddies that I used to go see those bands with. So, yes, indeed.
More into the drum realm, someone's trying to is moving into a smaller place and is looking at electronic drums.
Yes. Oh, you've got it on. You do. Your lavalier mic. Okay, so somebody's moving into a smaller place and
it is
considering electronic drums.
Electronic drums. Been looking at Roland V drums. I think this is like a general question. I hear from a lot of people. It's just like, I deal with it too, because I live in a small spot. But suggestions of what to do when there are sound constraints and you want to play some drums.
That is a fantastic question. Roland V drums, I love them. I have some and I love them. I've gotten many, many hours of shedding done on Roland V drums. And also an option is the Remo silent stroke heads and Zildjian low volume cymbals. To the human ear, those things are about as loud. And then I love the low volume cymbals and silent stroke heads, because you can take any old kit that's been laying around and convert it, and for not a lot of bread, and be shedding and be practicing pretty quickly. So if you want to invest in some Roland V drums, that's a great option to go with. If you've got a kit and you're on the fence as to whether or not you really want to get back into drums, or you're not sure if you're going to have the time, silent heads and low volume cymbals are a great way to go. And then I'm dealing with that too. So my wife and I both working from home. I've got real drums set up at the front of the house, and then in another room in the house, I've got drums with silent stroke heads and low volume cymbals. And I'm probably going to get some pads for the pedals to soak up some of the vibration, because even though I'm playing on the silent strokes and the low volume cymbals, you can still feel the vibrations and hear that a little bit. And my wife is doing Zooms and taking meetings from the house, so even myself, I have to consider that. And then sometimes I wake up early in the morning. Sometimes I wake up. This morning I woke up at 5:45, and I decided to write this morning, working on some new lessons. But sometimes I just jump in the car and I'm here by like 6:30 a.m. shedding and practicing here, and that, that's also a great way to get in some time, is showing up. I mean, if you have an office or a place where you could set up drums and show up before anybody shows up, that's an option too. Waking up early is an option.
Cool.
I've grown to love it. Love waking up early and getting some stuff done before the rest of the world starts emailing or calling or texting. So, sometimes we have to get creative on how, where, and when we can practice. Even as a professional drummer, I still have to get creative with when I can practice.
I used those silent strokes for a good 6 months of the pandemic, until finally a practice space opened up that I could rent.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're vibe too. Like I've seen a couple drummers, they use it as kind of an auxiliary cymbal too on their main kit, which is, I like those silent cymbals and silent heads. Things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's a fantastic development in the drumming world. Not to sound like if when I was younger, but if I would have had those when I was younger, I would have set up a kit with those and had that so that I could practice more, right? Because I would have to stop playing by 9 o'clock in respect to the neighbors. So now that we have those options, we can take advantage of them.
So
And of course, other companies make practice pad options too. Vic Firth, DW, they make pad options that you can put on the drums, and those are great options as well.
yeah, so somebody requested you play a shuffle.
Play a shuffle. I would love to play a shuffle. And Nick, can you pull up to here? Can we pull that up? I'll play a shuffle by myself while you pull that up.
I'll do my best.
He'll do his best.
What is it called? What's it called?
It's called Up to Here.
Up to here.
It's one of the play-alongs that we did on the first live where I did play-alongs. So, sure, I'm going to play a shuffle, and Nick's going to...
I'm working on it.
He's going to pull up the play-along. Here it is. Oh,
Oh, you hear it? Cool.
I heard it already.
All right, great.
So, look at that. We're gonna just play along to this play-along.
Ready?
I'm ready.